over to Liz.
So yeah, thanks a lot for coming on the tour. I'm going to try and not talk as much as I would normally about this building, because this for me is a very important building. It was where I started my work in the downtown east side back in 1991, and at that time I had just finished working as a nurse in the emergency department in Vancouver General, and I had left because I was very frustrated about how many people coming into the emergency department who were mentally ill were also living on the street and just didn't really have the supports they needed in the community, and we were just shoveling them out of the emerge onto the street. So I ended up coming down here and, knowing very little about the downtown east side, started effectively running this hotel. And after about 3 months of being in the building, people in the neighborhood found out, oh, there's a nurse working in this hotel, and so they just started sending all these really complex, sick, mentally ill, drug-addicted people. And I was 25 and very kind of naive and very Pollyanna, and I just said yes to everybody. And within about 3 months, out of the 70 rooms in the hotel, probably 98% of the people living in the hotel had injection drug use issues. Another 50% were diagnosed with a mental health issue, and everybody had had some sort of contact with the criminal justice system. So I now am writing a fellowship. I'm in a year of a fellowship year, and I'm trying to distill 23 years of experience of working in this community into what I think are some principles that worked and where we made mistakes, but what is useful for the community groups to try and learn from this experience. In particular around how drug users are seen and treated in community. And what I think was very important about this building was, even before it became renovated into what it is today, it was the first sort of act of an occupation, in a way, of a physical space where people who were so off the map and not considered human, they were demonized terribly in this community, in the media, and I think generally as drug users they were called junkies and zombies. And everywhere I go in the world, whether it's Brazil or China or everywhere, there's a nickname for people who use drugs that's very dehumanizing, and it robs them of their personhood. And strangely for us, this was just a place where we learned that people who use drugs are just people with terrible stories and terrible lives and very few social supports, and many of them came to us after horrific trauma and years of the system failing them. And so really what we did was say, okay, what can we do? We can fix a space where they can live, and we're not going to kick them out and move the problem along. We're just going to stabilize them. We're just going to try and provide stability. And that was in and of itself considered a very contentious act, because it went against a lot of the dominant beliefs and values of that time, which were, if you're going to be responsible and operate a housing project, you have to make sure people don't use drugs in your housing. Or if you're going to take care of people who use drugs, you've got to make sure that you're telling them all the time that using drugs is bad and that they should quit. So all of these other sort of messages that we were up against were very hard for us to actually just say, no, we're just actually trying to make it okay for the population to be less in crisis and access some basics that they otherwise aren't getting, like food, like healthcare, like access to some dignity. So that's what we started here, and this eventually, after many years, we were able to work with the provincial government to relocate what was at that time a very crappy SRO hotel with 70 rooms, one toilet for 19 people, one domestic shower stall for 19 people, one tiny little domestic stove for like 19 people on each of the 4 floors. So it was very substandard, in my opinion, as housing. However, it was essential and it was desperately needed. But when I started working here in 1991, this was the epicenter of a very heavily sad community. It wasn't that there was no community, there were a lot of people. There was 15,000 low-income residents in this neighborhood, 6,000 roughly of whom were injection drug users. So everything that we learned about the neighborhood was from being in this hotel for that 10-year period between 91 and 2001.